Hi everybody, very good morning to those in the US, North America, and a very good evening to those in India. Welcome to this live. I see a few people joining us. Hi Indira, happy International Day of Yoga to you too, and to all our followers. Today we're doing live on yoga and diet. And when it comes to diet, we have to bring in Ayurveda. And today's guest, Salila, is an Ayurvedic practitioner in the US, has studied Ayurveda in India, in Kerala, but she lives and practices Ayurveda in the US. So let's get her on and talk about diet and yoga practice today. Just give me a minute. Okay. There she is.
Namaste,
Namaste,
Pradeep
Salila.
ji. How are you?
I'm doing really well.
It's
It's been
a
what, a
year.
year already? It's becoming an annual thing, but I'm so glad to see you, and hope you can hear me and see me. I can hear you really well, and I can see you clear. I'm so glad to have you here, Salila.
Thank you for having me. Such an honor and a pleasure to meet with your community, and always a memorable chat when we have a discussion like this.
I'm glad. Happy International Day of Yoga to you.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
To you and everyone here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to this live on yoga practice and diet. And when we say yoga practice and diet, invariably we talk about Ayurvedic diet, because obviously there's only so much we gather about diet in yoga texts.
Right.
And so we naturally gravitate towards the sister science Ayurveda, which
Right.
has loads of diet related information. And glad to have you here because you've been practicing Ayurveda, especially the preventive part of it. And so I'm sure you must be getting a lot of people to come to you and ask questions about diet in general, but also diet as part of a yoga practice. So we could talk about both topics, diet in general, because ultimately we're looking at health,
Yeah.
and because our audience is largely yoga practitioners, we
Yes.
should talk a little bit about yoga practice and diet.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, in the context of Indian South Asian diet, we look at diet as a result or as a function or something that is supportive to our professions, because our diet is very closely related to our jati, our gotra, our varna. So based on our profession, our specific Ayurvedic diet is practiced within our families and passed on through hundreds of generations. Now, there is that widespread array of professions. From those, there is now patya, apatya, meaning proper diet and improper diet for different stages of life, and also for different spiritual inclination, if you may call it.
Yeah.
For example, yoga is a very different spiritual inclination from, let's say, an Ayurvedic way of life, a Charvaka way of life. So when it comes to yoga and diet, we are now looking at the yamas and the niyamas. We are looking at ahimsa. We are looking at those qualities that a yogi is practicing day in and day out, moving closer to dhyana, samadhi, to enlightenment. So then, in today's context, things like being a vegan, finding sources of food that do least harm to the planet, to the ecosystem, to others, to self, all these have to now come into play. So if an Ayurvedic diet was here, yogic diet is here. It's several notches up now. We cannot ignore all these factors that go into how our food is produced, it's grown, it is marketed, it is displayed for our purchase, and then finally it is cooked and we sit down and have this food. So how pure can I make it? How sattvic can I make it? Becomes the first question for a yogic diet.
Sure, I think we should surely spend a little more time on this topic. Should we start off with just understanding the Ayurvedic diet principle? And obviously, I think you also did mention that there has to be changes that we need to make in the present day because it's not the same. These are principles that was followed few millenniums ago, and then it was probably applicable until, say, the past 200 years. Right. But things have changed now. So I think we should just start our conversation. I mean, you should share what a general high-level Ayurvedic diet principle is, and then we could probably get a little deeper into how it's relevant today and how it could change. And soon after, we'll talk about yoga and the diet for a yoga practitioner and a sadhak.
Yes. So one of the first instructions about diet, I like to take it from the Adhyaya, the chapter about how a baby is formed, and when the baby comes into the world, what should be the diet. So that to me says that, okay, this is like one of the foundational instructions. And the foundational instruction is very simple. It says, eat as your parents have eaten, as your brethren have eaten, as your community has eaten. Because today's DNA, today's genetic information tells us that different races having different DNA structures have different gut microbiota and have different kinds of enzymes available in their body to digest certain foods better. For example, someone from China, Korea, Japan will be able to digest soybean much better than someone from Europe or from someone like an Indian person. So then it becomes very important to look at that, okay, if we are going to take in large amounts of soybean, how am I going to improve the digestibility of that? What methods am I going to use? Now, there are enzymes in a Japanese person's gut, which is very good at digesting certain seaweeds that we do not have. So then we have to, now we are looking at this information and then piecing it and connecting it to that information from our acharyas saying that make sure you eat like your brethren, your parents, your relatives. So that starts to make sense now. So that is one of the first rules. Then there are, from there on, it opens up that we follow our Agni, our digestive fire. This is another key diet rule, that if we are not eating adequately according to our Agni, when our digestive fire is high, we are saying, no, I'm going to fast, I'm going to not eat that extra roti or not have that extra serving of rice. I'm going to continue eating my khichdi. We're making a mistake. If our Agni is very low, we're not feeling hungry, but we are like, nope, mom made the food, I'm going to sit down and eat it. She's going to be upset with me otherwise. Again, we are making a big mistake because the byproducts of this insufficient digestion is ama. And once this ama has clogged our channels, there is a vikriti in the channels called ka vagunya, meaning the space gets impacted, the vata, pitta, kapha, the energies that were supposed to be free-flowing now get obstructed. Now disease starts to manifest. And that could start off with something like a discomfort, a headache, an upset stomach, and soon it will become cardiovascular issues, diabetes, atherosclerosis, Alzheimer's.
Super. So you're talking about at a high level the family that we are born into, the people around us before us, and what kind of food habits they've been having. That simply tells you what you should be eating, at least to start with. And then you also mentioned about the individual's Agni. That would further differentiate the food within that community or region. based on the individual's Agni, again, that should change, or a person should be able to identify. And very interestingly, you also gave an example of how mom has prepared something really nice, and it's inviting, and then you've had your stomach full, but then you want to eat more. And also when you're eating with people around, of course, people would want to. They encourage you to eat more than you've had, and especially if you say it's nice, then the idea is if it's nice, then you should be eating more.
Right.
And so the point I'm trying to make here is Agni and then the doshas that you mentioned about, both is indicating towards a certain ability in the individual to connect to their own body, the physiology through the Agni and also through the doshas, the ability to connect in the first place, and then the next step would be to act according to that. So in this context, what do you think has changed in the modern day? The principles are there. Yes, we understand. We have more access to these principles these days because of the internet.
Yes.
But what do you think is missing right now, and how do you think we should adapt to those high-level principles we just talked about?
Yeah. So several key things are missing today. One is that individuals are no longer connected to their own body's intelligence and wisdom. The smartest of us, the most meditative of us, are constantly pulled out of their body by our to-do lists, by the demands, by our Zoom meetings, by everything that we want to achieve in a day. We are no longer in touch with our instincts about, am I full? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? These basic, do I need to go to the bathroom? We've lost touch with all this. And we really have to do those meditative practices. We have to check into our body constantly to understand and interpret its signals correctly. We've lost touch with that. Two, there is too much production of ama in the body simply because of the way our food gets handled now. It's no longer fresh food plucked from a plant or produced by a farmer who created it with a lot of love and brought it to the market for us to have. It's made in a factory. It's gone through certain processing where many times chemicals are used, and it works because we are able to mass produce with it. But then on the negative side, our bodies are smart. Our bodies know how to trap these chemicals in our body, under the skin, in the lipid molecules. It's going to just shrink wrap it and hide it away in the joints. And after 10, 15, 20, 30 years of consuming such a diet, naturally we have joint aches, naturally we have a foggy mind, naturally we have sluggish digestion. So our digestion is affected by lifestyle factors, all the stress that we face on a daily basis. I was reading that, the stress a normal person faces today is like a ridiculously high amount, like 10 times, 20 times. I could be wrong on that, but that many times more than a World War I soldier in the trenches.
Okay.
A soldier in the trenches from World War I felt way less stress than you and I.
Okay. So I think we've pushed our limits. I mean, body's limits to, the body can take up these, everyday challenges that we throw at it. It can continue to function pretty well for a while.
Yes.
And you did mention, that it's all going to break down at a certain point.
Yes.
And it could be different for different people, but there is a breakdown point. We only know that my body can handle this, or yesterday I could do this, I'm going to do this today again, and do it tomorrow again. But we don't really understand that point where it's starting to break down, or probably understand as in we are at a point where there's very little we could do to reverse everything that's happened so far, right? Most we could do is probably get a medical intervention and probably stop what has happened so far. But we cannot really reverse, and which means these vital forces that you just talked about, the Agnis and the doshas, and to be able to use that wisdom principles based on these concepts is going to be a lot more challenging. A different kind of an approach is required from there.
Yes.
What do you have to say?
Yeah. Ayurveda has beautiful cleansing mechanisms. See, Ayurveda is the science of longevity. It is the science that helps us live our best life on a daily basis, plus increase our health span, so that we are mobile, active, alert, and contributing to society for the longest time possible, till our last breath. That is what Ayurveda promises us. So many of these byproducts of incomplete digestion, the ama, like Ayurveda likes to call it, can be cleansed out. Not 100%, but enough. And our body is a very forgiving place. It is designed for adaptation and resilience. So unless we've been really egregious, all of us can look forward to a life of great potential through these Ayurvedic cleansing practices. And Pradeep, we also have these cleansing practices in yoga, right? The
Shat karmas.
What is it called?
The Shat karmas, or the kriyas.
Right, the Shat kriyas, right. Similarly, the Panchakarma in Ayurveda. So the Shat kriyas and the Panchakarma. If you're able to do one of those on a yearly basis, we are good. That's what our grandparents did.
Yeah, so I think also the need for such practices, or the importance of such practices, so much more. I think also because we are in a generation where we are happy to get a service, be it our own health. We want someone else to give us that service rather than we doing it ourselves. And so most of yoga and a lot of Ayurveda is about doing it ourselves every single day. I think that's where we've gotten lazy, and we have someone else who would of course charge, but we are happy to pay that and passively receive that service. And that also has just probably left us to endure this more and more, and wait for the body to break down before we throw ourselves to someone else and say, you take care of me for the next whatever.
Right.
Fix this for me. I have this much time only. And so very interesting that how our modern day priorities have only made our health priority, which is probably the number one, like you just mentioned about the Ayurvedic objectives of Ayu and what the importance of Ayu and how we get to achieve our worldly responsibilities. But we've totally ignored that part, and then we just want to physically, and material world drives all our actions. And so in such a world, you say that, earlier you did mention about what role yoga could play to first also help connect to Ayurveda, meaning you did talk about how a meditation or probably a self-awareness practice in yoga could get us back to our own bodies. And also that's when the application of Ayurvedic principles could be, very effective.
Yeah.
So these yoga practices that we talked about also requires a certain kind of diet, which you mentioned earlier. Can you explain a little bit more about a certain yoga practice? You could start with asana, and what kind of food would go really well with asana? What kind of food would go well with pranayama, if you're deep into the practice of pranayama? And for someone who's practicing meditation, what kind of a food would go really well?
So this might be a little bit controversial. I would like to say that sticking to a pure vegetarian, organic, grown as close to home, at least within 50 kilometers, 50 miles, because that would be the food that will be full of juicy prana. That would be the food. I believe that God, divine, the creator, Mother Earth, produces exactly what is needed for the humans in that region. She will produce it around that region, because the plants are in a symbiotic relationship with us. There is energetic exchange of information. Now that I'm studying so much about the plant and the plant medicines, I feel like if there is a sick person, the plants that can heal that person literally grow around that person. There is so much love in nature. Like when we are in sync with nature, nature is constantly supporting and providing for us. So it is so fascinating that there is this plant called poison ivy that can hurt you really badly if you touch it, if you get exposed to that poison. The medicine for the poison ivy grows right at the base of the poison ivy. The antidote to the poison ivy. So that's how loving this entire universe is. So the first step towards having a diet that supports our yogic practices would be to have the most loving diet possible. Now, if I had a Lamborghini, I'm not going to put skunk in my Lamborghini. I'm going to make sure that I put the highest quality of fuel in my Lamborghini.
That's right.
These are $1 million Lamborghinis. That this is the only cloth we have, the dress we have. This is our space suit. This is what we're using to travel through time. So making sure that we are absolutely putting organic, freshly produced vegetables, fruit. Before we start the practice, having something like a warm spiced tea, not tea as in chai, not something that is stimulating, but something like cumin, coriander, fennel, boiled together with a little carom, a little bit of turmeric, a kadha like that, a very traditional kadha that we used to do. In some parts of India, we put cinnamon, we put licorice, cardamom, all this, creating a nice little kadha like that in the morning to sip on, and then go do a practice. Then after the practice, open up the digestive process with some fresh seasonal fruit. And then once the Agni has built up, then eat a meal, which could be, again, simple, soupy, lots of fresh vegetables, well cooked, spiced, with a little bit of ahimsa ghee if we can get that. Or if we are a vegan, then using something like a roasted sesame oil. And then that is one meal. And then we end the day after about a 6-hour gap with another similar meal. I think this would be a very nice, very beautiful way of living for a yogi. However, if this yogi was a householder and had great demands on them, they needed to be physically active, then they can add more enriching, more rich, dense foods like root vegetables, milks, nuts, sprouts, while making sure that this is all adequately cooked, soaked, peeled, etc. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think we are also looking at, at some level, the food is going to also influence the effects of the practice itself. The kind of asana, pranayama, whatever yoga practices that we are into, the outcome of the practice, the experience of the practice, or in a way, not only what we do on the mat, but what you're saying, the kind of food that we're going to consume. This is something that we're putting into our body. And so obviously, it has a, very, very important role to play in how we experience yoga and, how that whole experience brings us back to the practice. So I think it's pretty interesting to see that the food is going to affect the practice, and the practice to some extent, being conscious of your body, and is going to help you choose the right kind of food as well. If you're aware of, like you mentioned about the appetite part and Agni part, when to eat, when to have a meal. For that you need to be connected. So the practice affecting the choice of food, or the quality of food, the quantity of food, I think that is pretty interesting. I think that's something that we don't often get to read in a yoga text, because yoga text obviously is talking about, say, hatha texts talk about hatha yogis who live, in a hermitage. We don't.
Yeah.
We live in an urban city. And so we need to be careful as to what to pick from these hatha texts, which recommend a certain diet for a hatha yogi.
Right.
So the closest we could get is to pick this from Ayurveda, and I think what you just mentioned makes sense for any kind of practice, be it asana, pranayama, meditation. So you did also mention about seasonal, and can you expand a little more on how this is also very important in changing as per the seasons rather than sticking to the same kind of diet throughout.
Yes, yes. I have several examples to share about this. I had a client who decided to order fresh food from Whole Foods, which is one of our groceries here. And because she was a very busy executive, she decided that she was very conscious about eating fresh food. So she decided to order broccoli, tomatoes, and mushrooms, which were her favorite three vegetables. She said, I know how to do this. I'm going to order this throughout the year. She just put in a, order, Siri ordered it for her. And every week this would get delivered to her and she would cook it for herself, and she would feel very good that she was taking excellent care of her body. She was cooking in spite of her busy schedule. At the end of the year, she started to have little skin rashes. So she went into her physician and she did a blood profile. And guess what? 3 foods she turned out to be allergic to. Mushrooms,
The ones that
tomatoes, broccoli.
Broccoli.
Because she ate them out of season. She ate them continuously for an entire year. She turned out to be allergic to them. So she had to now stop. Now, that is one thing. Now, here's another piece of information. When we have summers, our vata is really high. Our heat in the body is really high. One of the best foods that we all get during summer is mangoes. And mango is nice and dense and sweet and juicy, and it's cooling to the body, and it calms down vata. It cools the body. It gives a lot of nutrition that is required, because during summers our digestion is affected, our body starts to get weak. So here we have this juicy fruit as an antidote for all the afflictions we may get during summer. So this is how the love of Prakriti, Mother Prakriti, is for us. She provides us exactly what we all need during that season, in that location, in that area. So when we eat locally, we already know we are using food as medicine. We are already knowing that we are not transgressing against that rule, that if you abuse this food, this is going to cause issues in your body. So we have to find some way to reconnect to the intelligence of our own family, our own community, and learn about those seasonal foods our grandmas made, those transitional foods our grandmas made. Like I was reading that, when we move into the monsoons in Kerala, every family would make something called a Kushmanda Rasayana. And the grandmothers would make the Rasayana and give it to all the children, so that as the monsoons are coming in, they are not going to get affected by coughs and colds and fevers. So we've got to go back to all that and rediscover these beautiful practices so we can continue to stay healthy. Because it's not about like, oh, I got a cold last week or last month or 5 times a year. There's only so many number of colds we can get in a lifetime. And if we've exhausted that list early,
that quota,
we're going to fall off that cliff. We're going to hit that point of no return.
Interesting. You've been talking about seasonal foods. You need to eat, like you mentioned about mangoes. You just enjoyed mangoes in India. I hope you got a chance to.
Yes.
You did, okay. One other related topic to this is also the combination of foods. I mean, what food we take together, and there could be some compatible ones and there could be non-compatible ones. I think you should also share about Viruddhahara to us and see how that also makes sense.
Yes.
Apart from the seasonal changes you just shared.
Absolutely. This is so important, especially when clients come to me who have recurrent skin infections, who have recurrent rashes and things like that. It definitely is an abuse of some kind of incompatible food that is already described in the Ayurvedic text, or there is some combination that is not just working for their body. So by elimination and experimenting, we figure out, is that a gluten allergy? Is it a lactose allergy? Usually nowadays it's a gluten problem or it's a lactose problem. But that doesn't mean that everybody out there now start doing gluten-free. If it's working for our body, if something is positive for our body and it is keeping our body nourished, eliminating it unnecessarily is also an act of himsa, is an act of violence against ourselves, because we are depriving our body of something that it knows how to work very well with, and now we're going to introduce something it has to learn how to work with. Having said that, some of the negative combinations that I like to call them are obviously adding sour, salty things to milk, because that curdles, we know, right in front of our eyes, it turns into something unpalatable. If you mix foods like sour foods with milk and give it to toddlers, they will not eat it. They have a very good sense. They will say, nope, I don't want it. Then something else is like mixing fish with milk. There are some instructions like do not mix radish with fish. There are some instructions about cooking certain foods in mustard oil. These are all like certain instructions that are given to us. But some of the most important instruction based on my knowledge, is how we are among the healthy, among those who are very conscious about eating green leafy vegetables. They will have green leafy vegetables every day. Having green leafy vegetables will increase oxalic acid in your body, will lead to like issues with your gut, with your joint health. In societies and countries and cuisines and regions where greens are had every day, they have a very specific way of cooking greens. They will boil the greens, they will discard that water, then they will squeeze and use that greens. So if there is someone who within this community, the yogi community, is very careful about having spinach or kale or any kind of greens every day, they have to be careful that they boil it, discard the boiled cooking liquor, mash it very well with spices, and then eat it. Then that greens will be good for your body. It is best to use vegetables with grains and with spices and oils. This is the best kind of food that we can have. This is the easiest food that will be digested by the body at its peak potential.
Nice. I have a very important question for you. Just give me a moment. I need to just plug my phone in.
Yes.
Okay, almost. Okay, I'm back. I mean, quick hello to everybody who's just joined in. Welcome to this live. We are with Salila, who's an Ayurvedic practitioner, and she's been practicing in the US. And my question is related to this point. The food that we've been talking about, or probably you did mention about, the food of the family you're born in, the community you're born in, that's the best one, obviously, for us, those in India. This Ayurvedic principles, or this food that we follow is already following some of those principles. And for this weather and for this geography and for these conditions, it makes sense. Now, for someone, either it could be someone moved from India to North America, like you have, and also people living in North America for a long time, which means the body is accustomed to the weather there, conditions there. What would you say? Because, obviously looking for answers to these questions in an Ayurvedic text, which was meant for the Indian subcontinent, would be a little challenging.
Right.
But you've been in North America for a while, and you've been practicing Ayurvedic diet there for a while. So you'd be a good person to help us understand what do you think kind of food, and what major changes do you recommend for someone who's now living in North America and that climatic conditions?
Yes. So I was very lucky that I grew up in a Fauji family, an army family. So I traveled all over India growing up. So I have some insight into different cuisines of India. So now, even though my family is from Kerala and summer vacations, I grew up eating our beautiful coconut-based food. When I came to America, I realized that coconut is always frozen here, and coconut is now an indulgence. And eating coconut-based curries here would be a crime against my body. Now I have to start eating like how food is prepared in the Himalayan region, in the Gangetic Plain region.
Yeah.
Luckily, because I grew up in North India, these foods are very familiar to me. So naturally, I cook like a North Indian now. Most of my food is like a North Indian. 70% North Indian, 30% South Indian. This works for my body. This keeps my body healthy. Then the second thing to understand is that our body is a fantastic machine. It immediately gives us feedback. I call it the gut's love language. The gut tells us whether it's loving something or it's hating something. As soon as we eat something, if it feels heavy, if we feel headachy, if we feel sluggish and sleepy, if we have an immediate bowel moment, if we have aches and pains and discomfort, and the next day our elimination does not look as like a soft banana, that is feedback to pay attention to the food we ate previously and to stop that and to eat something simpler, cooked, warm, with vegetables and spices and salted, savory. So I had this lovely client from Toronto who's from Kerala, and she's having digestion issues. So I asked her what she's cooking, and she said, poriyal, the usual
Like back
sauteed
home.
vegetables, and then make it in coconut oil, add lots of coconut over the top, sprinkle on top of it. And this is Toronto. This is cold. Naturally, her body is not able to handle it. Naturally, she's not at the peak of health. So then I had to share with her recipes from North India. I had to say, no, this is how we make so that your body is able to digest it better. Because coconut is kapha producing, coconut is cooling. It is the opposite of the environment there. If somebody is living in Dubai, extremely dry, look at what are the regions in India that are extremely dry. We can think of Rajasthan. And we are so lucky now. There are so many good YouTube channels where wonderful women, men are sharing very traditional cuisine from those regions, unadulterated, right? So we can learn from all that. And this is a way to play. This is a way to invite these new taste profiles into our daily menu to become like really curious about what's out there. What else can I use? What's going to make me more healthy?
A very interesting approach, Salila. You're saying you might be from a certain region within India, but I think look for, say if you're in North America or you're in UAE, look for a similar kind of a place within India and then adapt that kind of food, especially if you're an Indian, of course.
Right.
And saying that would be the best way to adapt to a new geography. And eating the locally grown food, maybe adapting or maybe identifying some of the characteristic similarities between the locally grown vegetables versus vegetables grown back home. I think that's also a good way to make choice of what you should continue to eat, fruits, vegetables. And other things, right?
And there are so many Indians everywhere, so many South Asians everywhere that now farmers here will grow all the indigenous vegetables. Like I get my lauki, I get my okra, tinda, everything. I get everything here. Arbi.
That's nice. All right. I think this whole topic itself, I don't think we can do justice to this topic on a live, which is meant to be short and quick. But surely I think we should look at inspiring ourselves and going back to digging deeper and bringing these principles into our life. But before we close, I mean, we should, we have a lot of people joining in. I think there were some comments or questions, if I'm not wrong. People, you can throw in questions at Salila regarding diet and in general or diet and yoga. to be specific. You're most welcome to share questions. While we wait for questions, Salila, I have one for you.
Yes.
We did talk about, the ingredients, the combination, the seasonalities of ingredients to bring in. Would you also help us understand the habits or behavioral aspects of consuming a food that is conducive for good health, or for that matter, yoga practice as well? Apart from just the ingredient part, which is very important, primary, and then the way we cook it or the way we consume it, any habits or do's and don'ts around this would be helpful.
You bring a very, very important point. We have to be in our rest and digest state, meditative state as we are cooking, because cooking is an act of love towards our body. We are offering prasadam to our temple. So if we can take a few deep breaths and connect to ourselves, and as we are cooking, think of our ancestors. Like, it doesn't have to be very woo-woo. For me, when I cook with my daughter, I tell her that this is Grandma Ambika's curry. This is Varli Grandma's, special fish curry. So we are bringing in our ancestors there. We are connecting our chain of our lineage. We are passing on something important. And so from a simple dish of sambar, it now elevates to Grandma Ambika's sambar, right? It's her favorite food, something like that, right? So bringing a sense of sacredness, like this is not just, we're not just throwing things together to bring something to the table that we're going to quickly eat as we watch a movie or something. No, this is a sacred act of preparing prasadam for our body. So even if we're just mindful of that little flag there is adequate for our children, our family to get that. What is happening is very important, because 20 years down the line, the big food, big pharma is going to be even more powerful than what it is right now. And there's going to be even more devices and wearable technology and bionic body parts. They're going to be pulled out of their body even more than us. I believe that as parents, we have a responsibility to pass on these practices, maybe in a little bit more forceful way than our parents did. Because our parents, did not pay attention to all this. I don't know about your parents, but mine didn't. But I'm rediscovering and learning all this for me. And then the second practice is, before sitting down, just taking a few minutes to pray, to thank the food, the producers of the food, to thank God, so that we are in that rest and digest state. And our rishis already knew that if we are sitting down feeling emotions of anger, grief, or any of these, shoka, krodha, I'm blanking out on the third one. So all three aggravate the three doshas. So sadness is dense and downward pulling, so that will aggravate kapha. Anger is outward and reactive, pitta. That would aggravate pitta. And then vata is anxiety, stress. So any kind of bhaya is the third one. Fear, anxiety is going to aggravate vata. So if all three are in imbalance, then we are not going to be able to digest that food properly. Even before we put a morsel in our mouth, we are in a state of chaos, disharmony. So by taking a few deep breaths, we bring ourselves to center, we bring ourselves to balance, and then we begin eating our food. There's this fascinating thing I was reading about. Now, if we have a few minutes, like in traditional special meals, we put 4 little pieces of rice on the side before we start eating, based on our Sanatana Dharma, based on our Vedic way of living. What those 4 pieces of rice mean is that 1 is 2 are the deities who are responsible for our karmic accounts. All the good karma we've done, all the bad karma we've done. And then the other 2 are for the Yama, God Yama. And then the 4th one is for Yama Dharma, That Yama is going to follow his dharma no matter what. If we've done good, we're going to reap good. If we've done bad, we're going to reap bad.
Yeah.
And how just phenomenally beautiful that every time we sat down to eat, we put these 4 grains of rice aside to remind ourselves that ultimately this body is under the principles of Yamadharma.
Very, very nice. I think we do talk a lot about the ingredients. You should eat that food. You should be eating this kind of food, this recipe. But what you're saying is, all that is great. That's one aspect of it. But the state of mind that you're in and the attitude towards, the whole intent behind the whole ritual of eating the food also matters a lot. And in fact, it could even change the effect it could have on the body. If the doshas are, vitiated, obviously whatever good food that you're eating is not going to turn into something healthy into your body. I mean, so that's, so the two parts of this whole exercise is not just the great ingredients, knowing what to eat, when to eat, what combination and what quantity, how to be cooked, but also you're saying the state of mind, and more importantly, understanding the intent behind this whole activity that we do thrice every day. And somewhere we might lose the intent, or we might not really have time for it, and so we just rush into it. And fast foods, obviously, we are on the go and we're just consuming food. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's probably the missing part that we don't really get to hear often. Probably any topic on diet, it's a lot about the the minuteness, the chemicals, but never really about what's going on up here, and that the body is ready to take this on, and prepared to break it down and make it a part of oneself. I think that's very important in the modern day. And I think that's a missing element that we need to probably talk and encourage people to do more of.
Yeah, the Buddha was a great yogi. He never had a smoothie bowl in his life.
We do have a lot of Buddha bowls doing the rounds on Insta. So let me quickly look for some questions, Salila. I think I did see a couple of questions while... Okay, a lot of comments. Okay, while I'm looking for questions, how was your Yoga Day celebrations? Just quickly, what did you do for the Yoga Day?
Well, I'm going to attend a yoga class, and I have a packed schedule today. I have to work on some things. So, yeah, my client work. That's my yoga day.
Okay, good. I have one question here. My yoga day was pretty quiet, I would say. I mean, of course, at Shvasa, we've been building on quite a bit of long-term programs for people who practice here. Not just a one-day celebration, but we want to make it something that will change for the coming day. Yeah. So, I mean, for us yoga teachers, yes, of course, it's good to celebrate this. But I think our role of being a teacher, and I think it's an everyday thing, and many times in a day, remind yourself or be disciplined enough to carry this out. So ensuring we have strength to do this every single day. I think probably that's what we did as a little group of teachers.
Yeah. And please tell us something about the programs that you are coming up with. You said long-term programs, and I received your wonderful invitation. I'm going to look at it and definitely respond back. I'm thrilled. Thank you so much.
Sure, I will share more. I think we have a couple of questions. Yes. This one is on fasting, Salila.
Yeah.
Fasting is the new thing all around. Would love to hear from you on this.
Yes.
Would be thankful if you could help. Fasting as for the 3 days or the 5 day without anything other than water. So talking about water fasting for 3 to 5 days. Yeah. What's your take? I mean, what does Ayurveda talk about this?
So when we had this kind of knowledge passing from our grandparents to, our parents to us, It was easy to follow what they did. Unfortunately, we have lost connection with this knowledge. So it's important that before we start fasting, if we've not had any elder guiding us, we take help of a practitioner. I can give some high level details, but then if somebody uses that and hurts themselves, it's not good. It's bad karma for me. So to begin with, a simplest fast somebody can do is intermittent fasting of, let's say, one Saturday in a week, a liquid fast. So have a soupy meal for about 8 hours in a day. So within a span of 8 hours in a day, you could have that as 3 meals starting at hour 1, hour 4, hour 8, and then close the kitchen, close the mouth, and then rest and sleep for the next 16 hours. So that would give our body good amount of time to metabolize all the excess waste. The liver would kickstart, all the juices will flow in the body, all the circulation would be at its optimal, and then there'll be a very beautiful detoxing effect on the body. And the next day we will wake up feeling alert and bright, and our brain buzzing with ideas.